about 5 minutes just introducing myself, and I'm going to turn the floor over to Senator Kunz and also Representative Gaydos to talk about themselves. Then we're just going to have a casual discussion amongst ourselves, and I'm going to ask a few questions about what patient advocates mean to the work that we do. So as you heard, my name is Adam Taliaferro, and I've been in the New Jersey legislature over in the General Assembly, serving for the last 6 years. And as you heard, I also work for Bristol Squibb. In New Jersey, about 80% of the legislators have full-time employment outside of their work in the legislature. So we're what we call a citizens legislature. It still is weird to me because every legislator is a citizen. So for us to be a citizens legislature only means that we all work outside of or have full-time jobs outside of the work that we do here in Trenton. I don't have the honor and privilege of serving on a health committee here in the state. I chair our Law and Public Safety Committee, but my work with patient advocacy really comes through my day job at Bristol Squibb, working with oncology advocates and really trying to help them understand policies that affect their access to care. The most important thing is making sure that patients get access to the life-saving medicines and treatments that they need on a daily basis. So that's why I'm very thankful for the opportunity to work with MRF and join you all again. I had the opportunity to join you last year and do an advocacy training and talk about how to interact with policymakers, but we didn't have actual policymakers on the call outside of myself. So I'm so excited, so thrilled, and I'll stop there. And I have a special connection with both of these legislators, and they may not even know it because Senator Kunz was actually at the game when I had my spinal cord injury. And Representative Gaydos, I was born in Sewickley, and I know that's part of your district. So if I still lived in the great state of Pennsylvania, I would have been one of your constituents. And you probably know more about where I was born because we moved when I was 1 years old. So I don't remember much about it, but thank you both for your service. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I will stop and give the floor to Senator Kunz.
Well, Adam, thank you so much for that kind introduction of yourself and for inviting both of us to be here today to talk to advocates about the importance of the patient and advocate relationship with legislators. I've been in the state Senate now I'm in my second term here in Ohio. I served as a state representative for 2 terms prior to that. So starting unbelievably my 9th year, which I still feel like I'm a new legislator at times. I did have the honor and privilege of serving on the Health Committee in the Senate the last 2 General Assemblies. I'm not currently serving in this GA on the Health Committee, but I do serve on the Insurance Committee and have served on that committee throughout my entire time in the legislature. So definitely see lots of issues that intersect in both the health and the insurance committees with the topic for today. And I also have the honor and the privilege of co-chairing Ohio's Cancer Caucus, which is a legislative body made up of, it's a bicameral, bipartisan body made up of quite a few actually legislators. We haven't kicked it off this year for the new General Assembly, which just began in January. But last year we had quite a few, I think close to a majority of both the House and Senate definitely were involved in the Cancer Caucus in Ohio, which again is just kind of our way of bringing together the policymakers and hearing from stakeholders and others whose lives have been affected by cancer. And I know that everyone on this call has friends and family members who have either battled cancer, battled it and won, or maybe battled it and lost. I personally, both of my grandmothers died of cancer, one before I ever had the opportunity to know her. And then I've also just within the last year have had 2 very good friends who have battled cancer and thankfully are survivors today. So I'm really happy to be here and talk both with you and State Rep from Pennsylvania, your hometown. And thanks again for the invite.
Thank you, Senator Kunz. And I'll tell you, having firsthand seen the work that you all do and the work that's led by you with the Ohio Cancer Caucus, thank you for that. It provides a wonderful platform for patients, for medical providers, and really from anyone in the industry to help educate policymakers on cancer-related issues. And I remember I went to a meeting a couple of years ago and the room was full of people. And one thing that really stuck with me was that, every legislator that was sitting up there was attentive. Nobody was on their cell phones, everybody was in the room. And you don't see that in all places. So thank you for that. And again, thank you for joining us and looking forward to the conversation. Representative Gaydos, thank you. We haven't had the opportunity to meet in person. But like I said, as I was reading your bio, I already felt connected to you because of the district that you represent. And thank you for taking the time to join us and to be a part of this panel today. Thank you. Looking forward to hearing more about you.
Yeah, so thanks so much. I appreciate being a part of this today here. But so my background's kind of interesting. This is my second 2-year term. And prior to this, for 25 years, I was in the startup business. I ran my own business for 25 years, mostly data and information. But I also got involved in looking at medical device companies, life science companies, and on the innovation side. So I greatly appreciate all the work that goes into finding, cures, finding any kind of, relief in medicine, dealing with cancer, dealing with any kind of health problem. So I've kind of delved in that, and that's been pretty special to me. I'm on the health committee here in the state of Pennsylvania, but I also, like my colleague Senator Kunz, I chair the Cancer Caucus, which is new to me this year. So we're just kind of getting up and running, and I'd love to get best practices and see what we as a caucus can do that is most effective, and look at what other states are doing. I also co-chair the Life Science Caucus, which is a bipartisan caucus, and we obviously look at companies that are and individuals that are in the life science industry as well, trying to find a number of things. So that's a little bit about my background, and I'm really delighted to be a part of this. And now, frankly, I think we would have had a couple more people from our house on, but we have a press conference that just got announced by our majority leader at noon. So I've got staff watching that, but this is a priority for me now.
Representative Gaydos, thank you so much. And I thought that you were the new chair of the Cancer Caucus in Pennsylvania. I didn't want to let the cat out the bag, but hearing that, really excited for the work that you do. And I said your predecessor, Representative Benninghoff, was a friend, and I went to Penn State, and he represents that district. So I just love all these connections, and looking forward to the day we can all get back in person. Here, as you can see, I haven't wore a tie or suit in months, but here in the state of New Jersey, we're back having live voting sessions. So today's the first day, and we have our voting session starts at 1 o'clock today. So I will be hitting the floor at that time. But before we do that, I just want to have a conversation with you both, get your viewpoints on a couple of different issues, a couple of different misconceptions. Want to get some candid stories, if you're so willing to share about your interaction with, not only patient advocates, but just folks that come to see you in general. I think the first question I want to ask, and I'll ask it of myself, is, what does patient advocacy, when I say patient advocacy, what does that mean to you? For me, I always say, in my role as a legislator, you could be dealing with a health-related issue 1 second, the next is you deal with a law issue, the issues span so far. So I look at patient advocates as the experts. They're the ones that really help me understand the issues from a real perspective. If a policy is affecting them, let me hear how it's affecting you. So I always say, without them, without patient advocates, I wouldn't be able to do the job that I do each and every day, because they help inform me as I go forward. So I'll shut up. And Senator Kunz, if we could start with you, what does patient advocacy mean to you?
Adam, I think you really hit the nail on the head. I've joked since I've been in the General Assembly that, it's probably named that more so because we generally have to know a little bit about everything that that touches our state in our constituents' lives. And so really having that one-on-one contact and really having someone come in and tell their story, I think is one of the most powerful and most important things that we as legislators really hear and actually get to act on, is, to your point, really understanding what is going on in an industry, whether it's the healthcare, whether it's someone with cancer, or, to your point, it could be transportation, energy policy, all of the different stories that we hear, but really hearing from a family member or from the person themselves as to what's needed and what improvements can we make. What are we doing well and what's working, and maybe what's not, because we don't all have the same story, we don't all have the same situation, and so really to hear from people whose lives are being impacted or whose family members' lives are being impacted is it's a gift for us to hear from you.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Gaydos, how about you?
Sure. I mean, I would add on that it's really great to have groups like this and also representatives like Adam who are really helping guide these groups in the right language, so to speak, to connect both the patients to what we do as legislators. That's really important. And a little bit about my background is that I was once a staff person to a state majority whip, Mike Fisher, back in the early 90s when I got out of college before I started my own business. And so now I'm kind of back in on this side of things. And I always tell people that there's 3 ways to accomplish things in government, in the legislature, and that is legislatively, through legislation, through regulation, and through communication. And people sometimes get those 3 different things mixed up, and 9 times out of 10 you can actually achieve a lot more through communications than spending the time and effort to change regulations or legislation. And I think that's the biggest lesson learned for a lot of folks, is that they think that everything needs to be done through legislation, and it really doesn't. Good communication can actually get and find ways for us to achieve things that you don't need to do legislation to force people to do things. If you communicate, have a compelling argument, there's a way that you could always do it through departments. And so I always encourage people, don't always be so quick to jump at legislation or changing regulation. Communicate.
I think you both are spot on. And Representative Gaydos, you said something, it was a question I had later on, but I think we should talk about it now. You mentioned you were a staffer before. And, I before I took my role in the legislature, I was a lobbyist. And, the misconception for those that may be new to advocacy is, as legislators, we're very busy. We can't take every meeting, but there may be times when we send our staff to a meeting, and some folks may say, I didn't get to meet with the legislator. That's a wasted meeting. Can you please talk to the importance of your staff and how important they are in the work that you do?
Absolutely. And, this goes to your point, Adam, of saying that sometimes, we go from talking about healthcare to transportation, and we're jumping in all different directions just because we have a lot of constituents with a lot of concerns. And in many respects, we rely on those staff people to have that expertise and to be that constant and a lot of times I will admit that they'll know things more specifically than sometimes we do because they are just that particular issue. So it's absolutely great to be able to rely on really, really, really good staff to get that stuff done. Now, the other advantage that I had is that prior to running, I actually did some advocacy for non-MD medical professions, including pharmacists, podiatrists. We represent some other healthcare practitioners, again, non-MD medical professions in the lobbying community. So I probably had the advantage of kind of being on all sides of the table at one point or another in the last 30 years. And again, this goes down to communications.
Absolutely, and Senator Kunz, I believe it was Nick from your office that I worked with in getting you to join this call. And can you talk about how you utilize your staff? And again, going back to the importance of advocates, making sure that they develop relationships with the staff, because as Representative Gaydos said, a lot of times they're because we're all friends here, sometimes they're more knowledgeable on issues than we are as legislators. So if you could speak to that, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. In Ohio, we have 33 senators. I represent about 380,000 constituents. I'm really fortunate in Ohio, we have 2 paid legislative staffers. And so they really do hold a lot of institutional knowledge of what's happened in the state, and just have a little bit more of an opportunity to do a deep dive into certain policies. They're the ones who do a lot of research for us. They do research requests in Ohio. We're also lucky to have an actual body called the Legislative Service Commission, who are a group of lawyers, and they will research any topic, anytime that we need on an issue. And so our staff interacts with them on a daily basis as well. So they really do have an expertise in policy, and are able to go a little bit deeper on certain issues, I think, than even sometimes that I might personally not be able to have the time to do so. And, I will also just kind of touch on, I know we were talking about that I'm going to say your name right, Rep Gaydos, that she's new to Pennsylvania legislature. She has a lot of background and experience in the private sector and in other work. But, we all come to the General Assembly with different backgrounds from different parts of the state, different experiences. And it's really our staff, I think, that a lot of times kind of keep us on track. And when they meet with constituents, and sometimes, they take copious notes. They relay to me the stories and the issues, and really can drive down to what the constituent or the lobbyist or the advocate is looking for very quickly, because they just have a level and knowledge of expertise. We have a term limits in Ohio. And so we, for example, in the Ohio House right now, there's at least, I think, 20 brand new state representatives. And so if you think about, 99 state reps and 33 senators to get something enacted into law, or to change policy in a rule-making process, it really does matter to have great staff and to be able to talk to them, because you're not going to be able to meet with 133 legislators to plead your case anyway. So the more interaction that you can have with staff and with others to really state your case and to really advocate for what your issue is. And I think the representative talked about communication, and that's really the goal of our Cancer Caucus, is to allow another platform for communication to happen, both from advocacy and then amongst ourselves as legislators, because it's hard for us to interact. And of course, now with COVID, we're back in session downtown voting as well. But it is still, we're still keeping our distance, and it's hard to kind of do some of those normal meetings that you would have just naturally had in the course of a day to talk over an issue with even your fellow colleagues.
Yeah, and I guess what I'd also like to add is that, as all the individuals on this call, one of the things that I've always recommended is that you do go in to visit your House or Senator and walk in. Don't ask for anything. It's not, you go just in there and say, here's my business card. Here's even if you talk to the staff person and say, here's my business card. This is my background. This is where I live. This is where I'd like to be helpful. If you have any questions on this particular topic, come call me. And we take those cards, and when it says that on there, we keep them on our desk, or whenever an issue comes up, we will pick up the phone and call. So always kind of let them just walk in, and then let them know what your background is, and they'll call you.
Yeah, it's kind of like the mastermind theory. We have to know a little bit about everything, but to have the person who knows a deep dive that you have access to is so important for us.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you both more. And I always say, the first time you reach out to your representative, you don't want it to be or your senator, you don't want it to be when the house is on fire. Yeah, as you mentioned, you want to create that relationship, and oftentimes that relationship begins with that legislator's chief of staff. I'm here in my office right now. My chief of staff is outside on a phone call, speaking to a constituent as we speak right now. And I'll tell you firsthand, again, I keep saying amongst friends here, there's not a vote that I take or a policy issue that I write on or that our office puts out that doesn't run by Chris. He's my chief of staff. He is the brains behind the operation. And as I mentioned, here in New Jersey, I've got a full-time job outside of my role in the legislature. So I cannot be on top of every issue. And I really, my chief of staff is a full-time employee. And, and another thing that I'll tell you is that The district that I represent is, myself and my colleague on the assembly side, then my Senate colleague, we all share staff. So if you get to one of us, you usually get to all three of us, because we're sharing staff, and our staff keeps us up to speed and sending emails on various issues. So not to beat a dead horse, but the staff is a extremely important component of interacting with your policymakers. So just to, I guess, shift gears a little bit, I'm sitting here in my office right now, and in normal times, I get folks coming in and they want to meet with me. And as a legislator, I have a few things in my mind that I want to get from them. But before I get to my things, when someone comes to meet with you, what are and I know it varies from meeting to meeting, but is there a wish list of items that you're looking for when a patient advocate or an advocate in general comes to meet with you? Senator Kunz, we'll start with you.
I think the biggest thing for in my role when a patient advocate or a patient comes in to talk to me is for me to be a good listener. And really, I think their story is what matters the most to me, because I think that's, we can get the data from, lobbyists or other groups. We can figure out from insurance companies or, whoever the other stakeholder is, whether it's the hospital association, we can get a lot of access to those types of numbers and kind of a broad view. But to really hear a personal story from someone, I think is powerful. The other thing I think is when you actually have a lobbyist before you presenting an issue, I like to hear a solution. I think that one of the things that's important is obviously you might be coming to us with an issue, a problem. If you have some ideas on how to solve that, that's very helpful. Or what path in a perfect world you'd like to see. And then maybe we can find something, it might not be perfect, but, hopefully we can work towards making it better. I'm definitely a legislator who is a something over nothing type of thinker. And so it doesn't have to be at all or nothing. I'd rather have something. And so maybe presenting your case with some flexibility as far as what we could actually achieve. And sometimes, it takes several bites at the apple to be able to move the needle forward on policies that are complicated or complex, and dealing with a lot of partners. I think, having interested party meetings and communication, and you can really get a lot done, as we were talking earlier, without maybe enacting an entire new law, which is a lot more difficult, and for good reasons in a lot of cases. We don't want to legislate everything in our state, but I think really telling the story and then having some solutions that you feel would really make a difference for people are important to me.
Thank you, Senator, and that's something that always comes to mind to me. As legislators, we want to listen, and we hear a lot of problems and a lot of issues, but it's very, just in my standpoint, it's you don't always hear the folks coming to you with solutions. And you help us with some of those solutions, that goes a long way. And Representative Gaydos, how about you? Anything that you look for specifically when an advocate comes your way?
No, I mean, I think it's that making that connection and just coming in, hearing personal stories, and then being accessible, and also recognizing that there's not always that particular issue that's up right in front of us that we're working on. But if you keep us in the loop on a regular basis, whether it be through conference calls and Zoom calls like this, or just e-newsletters, things like that, is just, if it's constantly in front of us, then there's going to be certain times where there's pieces of legislation which we can say, wait a minute, there's another piece of legislation over here, but wait a minute, I think I can add something onto this piece of legislation which will help this community here. So sometimes it is these incremental changes that might not be obvious at first, but if you're constantly in front of us, and that we will always keep you on our radar.
Agreed. And you both said something that really resonated with me. You say a lot that resonates with me, but two things that I think you both touched upon was patient stories, telling your story, and I think making it personal. I say, as legislators, we hear a lot of we have a lot of conversation with a lot of people, but the patient story is something that I found truly sticks with us policymakers. There's been plenty of times I've been in committee and you're hearing a bunch of facts and figures, and for me personally, it goes in one ear and out the other, and I'm hoping my staff is writing down all those facts and figures. But that patient story, when someone tells a story or tells a story about how a specific issue is impacting them, that stays with me beyond the committee meeting. I'm having lunch with my colleagues, my legislative colleagues, and my assembly colleague will say, "Hey, Adam, what about that story? Can you believe that story?" And the story kind of spreads like wildfire throughout the entire legislative body. So I often tell folks, please tell your stories. And, I'm looking here on this chat, I'm sure there's plenty of patient advocates that have inspiring stories of what they're going through or how they're helping family members or whatever it may be. But always tell those stories because those are things that we'll always remember. So, with that being said, do you all have an example or a story of an advocate that has helped change or shape the way you thought about a specific policy? Maybe you went in thinking one way and a group or an advocate came in and stayed on you, for months or maybe even years and helped shift your perspective or thinking on an issue. Does anything come to mind? And I'll open it up to Rep. Gaydos or Senator Kunz to begin with. Or if not, I'm happy to start as well.
Go right ahead. No, go right ahead.
So for me, it was probably my second term here in the General Assembly, and it was healthy breakfast initiative. They were looking for a state appropriation to help schools provide breakfast to our K through 12 students. And I'll be the first one to tell you, I was not familiar with the issue of healthy school breakfast. Of course, we think it's a good, who would not be supportive of healthy school breakfast? And they were asking for a very large appropriation. And, when you're talking about funding from the state, every little dollar counts. And they weren't, to be perfectly honest, they weren't at the top of the pecking order. But I will tell you, this group of men and women, when you talk about connectivity, communication, I cannot walk through the halls of the State House. I couldn't sign on to social media. I couldn't go to my legislative office without someone calling me literally every day. I mean, every day there was some point of connectivity. If it wasn't a phone call, it was a letter. If it wasn't a letter, it was someone stopping me in the hallway here in Trenton. If it wasn't someone stopping me in the hallway, it was when I was signed on to my Facebook, someone sending me a message on Twitter or on Instagram. So I will tell you, and this is over an 8-month campaign. And at first they weren't at top of mind, but I could tell you by month 5, month 6, month 7, these were people that I was thinking about every day, and their issue quickly came to the top of the pecking order, not only from my personal perspective, but my colleagues throughout the legislature because of the fabulous job that they did staying connected to us. And I know, hey, not all of us have the time and bandwidth to be that tenacious, but we'll talk about it later on. The work within coalitions can really help that cause. So I will stop there and say, and I'm sure we all have pretty similar stories, but that was something that really stuck with me. And it was just because of the multifaceted advocacy campaign that they took on for an 8-month period. And the one thing that I will say is that what we all know, advocacy isn't something that happens overnight. It often takes many bites at the apple, many meetings, many communications with your policymakers. So that's something that always stick with me, and I give those folks kudos for their efforts.
I was trying to think of one where my mind was changed. I have one that popped into my head though when you were talking that I think would be good for this group, where I just wasn't aware of an issue. And it was something, it was almost, to me, it felt like so against common sense that I was so surprised by the fact, and it's the fail first methodology for cancer, for stage 4 cancer patients. And so we heard from, lots of patients discussing that their doctor knew for sure what medicine would work for them. And of course, the insurance companies were, basically not allowing them to have access to that treatment. They had to go through a series of other treatments, and people were dying before they even got to the medicine that the the healthcare and the doctor knew was the right prescription for them. And so really we listened to a lot of stakeholders, not only patients, but also our large medical centers here in Ohio, the James Cancer, for example, at Ohio State, a lot of our university medical centers and partners as well, to really try to craft policy that is, is just, I don't even want to use an adjective. It's so many different things. It's just wrong, plain morally wrong. And so thankfully, we also were able to use the platform of the Cancer Caucus to advance that legislation to really make sense for people who are in a terrible position, something that no one wants their loved one or themselves to be facing, and then to make it even more difficult not to have access to the care and treatment that they need. And so I was really grateful for the advocacy and the work that was done through lots of different channels, people coming together in partnerships to say, in Ohio, we don't want this for our constituents.
No, thank you, Senator, and thank you to the state of Ohio for passing that legislation. As you heard the senator mention, step therapy, some may call it fail first, is a policy where patients are forced to fail on the drug before they get the actual medication that they need. And that's a focus in many states throughout this country. We're dealing with it here in the state of New Jersey, and we're behind Ohio, but we're hoping to get to where you guys are. Representative Gaydos, anything on your end?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we talked a little bit about at least sometimes going for incremental changes, but I think we also have to look at things that can be big picture items, whether it be with pricing of medication, pharmaceuticals, that sometimes little fixes make the problem worse, and that we sometimes have to say, okay, at some point, these little fixes are going to make the problem worse. We need to step back a little bit and look at the big picture and do some sweeping reforms, because incremental changes just aren't going to solve the problem. In fact, it can actually make it worse. So I think we're seeing a lot of that in pricing of pharmaceuticals. And it's not an easy answer, because what people sometimes forget is that in order to encourage innovation, you want to make sure that the pharmaceutical companies that are often demonized are incentivized properly, either financially, et cetera, in terms of how they have to go through their clinical trials, other things like that, and so it's not as simple as saying, oh my gosh, they're charging too much for medication, because we have to also balance that with how do you make sure that we foster innovation in these areas, and that's short term versus long term, and again, I think sometimes we should be looking at some big sweeping changes on how things are being done, and that's what will really solve some problems. It's a balance.
Absolutely is, and I look at the issues that we deal with. There's always got to be a fine balance in the work that we do, and I'm looking at the clock here. We've got about 10 minutes before we go to questions and answers, but we're in a virtual world these days, and advocacy has also gone virtual. So I wanted to just spend a few minutes talking about virtual advocacy and your thoughts on social media. I tell you, I'm a big social media guy. I'm a big Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. And for me, I interact with legislators. I reached out to Senator Kunz on Twitter, and she's great at getting right back to you. And so many of our legislators are on social media. For my office, if I get mentioned 10 times on a specific issue, my chief of staff is calling me and saying, hey, Adam, you've been tagged in 10 posts about a specific issue. I think we should look into it. How do you guys handle social media? How does that work in the work that you all do? And I guess we'll start with Gaydos.
Obviously, we all know social media has pros and cons, because I think that it's always better just to have a conversation directly with your state rep or your senator, or at least make those attempts, with real people, because I think the downside is that sometimes people look at social media, emails, as that they can just sling things out there and express their anger about things. And I will tell you, 9 times out of 10, people will send me emails or other posts on social media that that they lump all legislators into one category sometimes. And so I think the downside is that people sometimes leap before they look. And I think that's the downside of social media. But again, it gives people the opportunity to communicate with their legislators a lot more efficiently than we've had in the past. So again, there's a balance there. But that's my greatest frustration with social media, is that people do leap before they look. And when frankly, right, the answer to their question is probably either on my Facebook page somewhere, on my website. Yes, I've sponsored that bill, or I'm co-sponsor that bill, but they sometimes go straight to angry without doing a little bit of extra research. So I'd actually like to see people do some research before they just sling those things out. But anyway, that's me.
Very, very well said. How about you, Senator Kunz?
Social media is a great tool to connect, and it's a great platform for us to also interact with our constituents. As the rep said, we can put things on our pages, and really, my monthly newsletter goes out on social media. I will say that the complicated part for me, I think, is I have my state Senate page, I have my Kunz for Senate campaign page, and then I'm Stephanie Kunz, right? And so for Facebook alone, on Twitter, I'm just Stephanie Kunz, and I kind of manage all 3 myself. And those are only 2 platforms. I still have Instagram, which I try not to do as much work on because it really brings me a lot of joy. And I really try to keep that the one social media platform that isn't work or doesn't feel as much like work. But really the amount of contacts can be great because of that access, but it's also overwhelming to some degree. I mentioned I have 380,000 actual constituents that I was elected to represent. Anyone can reach out to you on social media, and I'm not saying that that's a good thing or bad thing, but my loyalty is to my district. I'm the only person in the state Senate for the 16th Senate district here in Ohio. And so I'm their voice. I need to hear from them. I definitely, not saying I don't want to hear from other people, but it's hard to discern that on social media. And so my response really, with just kind of trying to manage it from a sunshine law perspective, obviously we have ethics laws, that all of these interactions are public record. I try not to respond outside of just, hi, thanks for reaching out to me. Here's my email. Here's my phone number at the office. This is a matter of official state business, and I'm happy to contact you and get back to you, or my staff will, with more information. But I just don't think I could possibly, we were talking earlier about having, a lot of legislators have another job, or they have a family, or they have fill in the blank. It's almost impossible, I think, to really keep up with going back and forth on. You'd spend your whole day doing it, is what I'm trying to say. And so I try to look at it once a day. And again, it's mostly me doing it. My staff does help with my state Senate Facebook page, the official page, but the rest of all of those platforms, it's just me. And so I really try to direct them back to an official channel so that we can really respond in a timely manner, and really, again, ensure that we're giving the best service to the constituents who I'm elected to serve.
Absolutely.
Let me add on that, is that Senator Kunz is absolutely right, is that it does become overwhelming. There was a point, particularly last year during this pandemic, where I honest to God, I'm not kidding, I had 32,000 emails that were unanswered. It just because they, obviously during the pandemic, we had staff people going through the emails. I like to answer them. Now, as a state house member, my district, we represent 62,000 people in our state house district. But to Senator Kunz's point, is that I mean, we try to listen to what's going on, keep our eyes what's going on outside the district, but at the end of the day, people elect us to represent our district. Now, that said, we represent, and, you know, as Senator Kunz is the chair of the Cancer Caucus, you know, you've got some expertise or in particular areas that you have an interest in. But it is also frustrating when someone calls you and they say, well, why didn't you know that there's this bill in the Judiciary Committee? It's like, okay, you know, we only have so many staff members, and then for our state house, it's significantly less than our state Senate, and so yes, it's great getting to know staff people, but even then, it's if you build those relationships, that's where you're going to get probably calls back more frequently, and only because that you've built that relationship up, and that staff person, or even those of us who are legislators, you know where you're, you know, where you're coming from, what you're going to bring to the table in terms of information. And so it's just, sometimes it is really, really difficult from the standpoint of quantity. But at the same time, it's nice because it's more accessible for most people.
Yeah, well, thank you both for your comments. And I always tell people, you know, your policymakers, we all got involved in this because we like people. We like interacting with people. We like talking to people. But I think one of the important things you both said was, you know, we have constituents that we represent. And I always say, you know, if you are an advocate reaching out to your legislator or policymaker, please let them know if you're a constituent or not, you know, or if you are a constituent, let them know, because we always listen, but we sometimes listen a little bit closer when it's in our backyard. So thank you all. And I say to Senator Kunz and Rep. Gaydos, thank you for inspiring me, because you know, you all are being leaders within your states, you know, chairing the cancer caucuses. Again, we're behind in New Jersey. We don't have a cancer caucus here in the state of New Jersey, but you all have inspired me to talk to my colleagues later today to hopefully see if we can get that started here in our state. So we wanted to leave a few minutes to answer any questions that may come from the audience. And I believe Cassie has been moderating or taking a look at the questions. So we will stop there and happy to answer any questions that have come up.
Thank you, Adam, and thank you so much, Senator Kunz and State Representative Eden. I'm so sorry we didn't get to meet you prior to this starting, but we really appreciate both of your time here. Adam, you're the world's best timekeeper. You're just, thank you for being you know, so on to the time. We did have a question here from David Martson, who asks, what are some common mistakes that advocates make when coming to see you? And that obviously is for all three of you.
Want me to? I'll start real quick. One of the things that I see, you know, I tell people I played football growing up. I don't know if my teammates were Republicans or Democrats. We all just push in the same direction. So there's sometimes will be advocates that'll come and say, "Hey, Adam, this coming to you. You know, the Democrats always support this issue, so I just wanted to come to you." And I would just say, for me, I don't care if the Democrats supported it or the Republicans supported it. Like, talk to me about the issue, and let's not assume because of your political party that you're going to support a specific issue. So that's the one thing that I say folks come, and, you know, not everyone does it, but at times people just assume because you're of a specific party, you're going to support an issue. And I will throw that to my colleagues.
Why don't we go with, yeah, perfect, Senator Kunz.
I was just going to say, that's a great point. I was voted the most bipartisan member of the state house. And so, you know, I think you never know, right? Like, you never know where I might fall on an issue, but I definitely want to hear from advocates. I think the other, you know, just one thing that maybe it's not a mistake, it's just something I think when you're passionate about your story and you want to have that platform and be able to share it. One of the things, you know, that Cassie just mentioned about Adam keeping on time, I think that the more concise that you can be and still tell your powerful story, but recognize that you might only have 15 minutes with a state senator, and then the next person after you feels the same way about the importance of their issue. And so I think just being really cognizant of the time that you have and making the most of it when you come in to meet with us is really important.
Yeah, I mean, I would absolutely agree with that. And know your story, but also don't rush. And we're normal people here, and sometimes people get nervous and they think they have to perform a certain way or have some particular structure. Just tell us your story exactly like you would be talking at home, sitting on your sofa with a family member that you are telling your story. That's much more compelling. So relaxing and just like not thinking that you've got to use any particular words or language, just kind of tell us, And then I think the other thing too is with that passion sometimes comes anger and frustration. And I think, getting mad at us if it's not a certain way is also a huge mistake, because if, we're on your team. And so we're trying to find that balance to bring as many people on board to this issue. And so sometimes we have to say, it's not, and this is to Senator Kunz's statement earlier, is that it's not always a perfect solution, but if we can advance the ball down the field, even just a little bit, then that's, what we're advancing the ball down the field, and recognizing that a win doesn't have to be, a touchdown, but a win could be an advancement in yards of taking that ball down the field.
Thank you, Representative Gaydos. I thank you for making that the football I think anecdote really helps people understand, especially me. Like, you don't get a touchdown by always throwing a long bomb, right? You gotta work your yards down the field. So that was really good advice. Thank you for that. One more question, and this is a question that I know Adam had, but possibly did not get a time to ask, but is still very important. So there's a common misconception. I used to have it before I got into advocacy myself, and I think a lot of other people do, that if a legislator is unable to make the meeting, but his or her staff only attends, that it's a wasted meeting. Can you speak to the importance of a meeting with legislative staff and how your staff assists in policy making? And why don't we start with Representative Gaydos and then go to Senator Kunz, and then we can end it up with Adam Taliaferro.
Well, I can tell you for our State House, we have very limited staff. And so it's always hard if it's not us. Sometimes we just can't make the meeting because we just don't have enough staff. On the other hand, it also depends on the staff person. And sometimes, a staff person that might not know enough about the issue is certainly better than no staff person at all. So always kind of give that legislator a break, because just keep in mind that we're being pulled in a lot of different areas. And sometimes I'll actually have my colleagues represent, say if it's, an issue that crosses boundaries or House districts. If I know that one of my House members, colleagues who is knowledgeable in the issue and I'm friends with, I'm going to be having dinner with them like the next night with some other issue. So we'll try to split it up that way. So if you get one or two reps, know what those relationships are amongst and between others, senators and House members, because a lot of times, at least in our state, the state Senate staff, they've got a lot more staff than we have. And sometimes if the senator from that area goes, that's great, because then I could get that information from their staff. So it depends on the staff person, but it's just know the staff, know the people, know the relationships, and that's very helpful. But you're right, we just can't cover everything, but we try.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think our staff, again, they're invaluable. They have a lot of times more institutional knowledge because they've been there longer, especially if you have a new member of the General Assembly. The other thing I will say is timing matters. So if it really matters to you that you want to have a chance to talk to your actual state representative or state senator, if it's not something that's an immediate issue, if it's something, again, kind of to what we talked about earlier with building relationships, and you have an opportunity to build that relationship, there's also times, at least in the Ohio General Assembly, in the 2-year period, that really ebb and flow with when we're super busy. We start our state budget right off the bat, I chair the transportation committee. And so this month of March, I'm really basically going to take most meetings that have to do with transportation, because that budget has to be done by March 31st. That doesn't mean I don't care about being the chair of the Cancer Caucus. I chair the Children's Caucus. I chair the Infant Mortality Commission in our state. These are really important issues that I love and I'm passionate about and that I work on. But I also love transportation. We're a logistical state. We're right in the middle, can reach the East Coast, the West Coast. You know, we have great, that's one of our biggest advantages as an Ohioan. And so I take that very seriously too. And so it's not that I don't love your issue or want to meet with you personally, but I have an obligation as the chair of the Transportation Committee to all Ohioans to make sure that we are all, you know, doing the best we can with your dollars. We work for you. And so we want to hear from you and we want to meet with you, but sometimes our staff might be a better option if it's a timely issue and you can't meet with us personally.
Ditto to what both my colleagues said, because I often say, and I say this publicly, my chief of staff is as I said earlier in this meeting, my chief of staff is the brains behind the operation. And he helps guide me on a lot of the decisions that I make when I'm casting my vote. So they are an invaluable resource.
Well, wonderful. And I wish I could continue this conversation because I'm sure there's so much more we could go over with this topic. But again, before our event platform cuts us all off, I just want to thank you, Representative Gaydos and Senator Kunz and Assemblyman, and I'll call you Assemblyman for this round, Adam Taliaferro, for your wonderful information. The advice was great, especially making the initial introduction and just saying hi. And that is so important. I'm here, I'm ready to help. And when you come with a problem to the table, it's always great to come with a solution, I think are some pretty key takeaways of that. So again, thank you all so much. We really enjoyed having you. I know your time is very valuable. So I know some of you have voting to go to, so I'll let you go and just say thank you and leave it at that.
Great, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Adam.
And then everyone has about 5 minutes until we begin our next session at 1 p.m. We'll see you back at the main stage. Thank you so much.